What's up, Spellslingers? My name is Garion John Wells.
I'm Drew Flitton.
And I'm Cory Janibagian.
And this is Untap
Upkeep.
Drink. Beer up.
All right, guys, welcome back. We're going to be doing another mini today. We're going to be tackling a very, very polarizing topic.
Today we're talking about Infect.
Ooh.
So there's a lot to talk about and not a lot to talk about.
So this is going to be kind of off the cuff. We're just going to have a discussion. Before that, we're going to explain what Infect is to those of you who may not know. But before that, we got to talk about the beer. So today, Garion, you brought the Pelican Sea Breeze.
My parents just barely got back from a trip over to Oregon. So this is the Lone Pelican Small Batch Series by Pelican Brewing. Obviously, they're over on the Oregon coast. And this is an ale with cranberries, juniper, and citrus peel.
Ooh.
So it was kind of an interesting one. My mom even gave it to me. She's like, I kind of wanted to give this to you as a Father's Day gift, but I also thought it'd be cool for your podcast. So,
Hell yeah.
So
happy Father's Day, boys.
So 7.1% and 18 IBUs. So very low bitterness.
Yep.
Yeah.
A lot of flavor. A little stronger than a lot, but it sounds pretty good.
It sounds like I'm going to like this because I like juniper, I like citrus, I like low IBUs.
I'm more excited for juniper
like
than
color.
some of the beers brewed with pine.
Pine is a much more powerful flavor, I'll give you that. So this is a big boy, so we're just sharing it for this little mini episode.
Garion, how is it?
It's very interesting, is what I'll say. Cranberries was actually the first thing I tasted, which is kind of weird. Like, you do have that, malty beer flavor, but the first thing I got was that, very dry, tart cranberry, and then came in sort of a bitter juniper that kind of meshed with the bitter of the cranberries.
So you're saying bitter a lot for a beer that has 18 IBUs.
It's not bitter in that way. You get that dry cranberry bitter.
So it's more of a tart than a bitter.
Yeah, I always have a real hard time with people talking about tart versus sour versus, to me, they're all the same.
Well, talking about sours, that's what it smells like to me.
It definitely smells like a sour, but
it's very tame if you're thinking of it as a sour.
I agree with you, Gary. It's bitter, but not bitter, an IPA.
It's like the sides of the mouth bitter. I immediately started to salivate.
It's a dry tartness.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's how I describe it. It's a dry tartness. The malt finish on it is incredible.
The cranberry and the juniper are solid together.
Yes, I like them.
This one's a really good one.
Yeah, I like this.
Previously on the show, we've had some kind of middle of the line not lackluster, but just kind of bland, mellow beers. This is not that.
Yeah, this definitely has a flavor profile.
Complex.
It's going for that.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. I like it.
I wouldn't call the beers bland. I would say that they're more like one note. They're not as complex, and they don't just have the punch that something like this has.
Yeah.
But
This one really smacks you in the mouth.
talking about punchy here, let's talk about Infect. All right, like I said, this is going to be a bit different from our normal routine. We want to have a healthy, constructive discussion about the mechanic.
Kind of a philosophical discussion.
Yeah, we aren't here to just bash on one side or the other. But before we do that, we kind of have to talk about the general concepts, right? So what is Infect?
So the rules text reads, Infect, parentheses, this creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters and to players in the form of poison counters.
So this is a static ability that's going to be on creatures.
So poison counters are synonymous with Infect counters. If you hear one of those, they're the exact same thing.
It just depends on where they're at, right?
Yeah, I think old Infect was referred to as poison, and new, the ability Infect refers to obviously
Right.
poison counters,
So-
but everyone just calls them Infect counters.
Yeah. There were insects and snakes and stuff back in the day before it was kind of
Yeah.
errated or whatever you want to call it that just did poison counters.
So one thing to note with Infect is that damage dealt to a player by a source with Infect doesn't cause that player to lose life. Rather, it causes the source's controller to give the player that many poison counters.
There are a lot of rules on this that get very, very specific in the way that these counters interact. I don't know that we have to go that deep into it.
Right. I think the other one that we have to just kind of say here, and Cory kind of covered it with just the basic rules text, is that damage dealt to a creature by a source with Infect isn't marked on that creature, right? So if you deal 3 damage to it, it's not actual 3 damage. Rather, it causes that source's controller to put that many -1/-1 counters on that creature. So
it's physically possible to remove those counters if you have cards that do that.
yeah, and +1/+1 counters and -1/-1 counters actually cancel each other out. So that is one way to get rid of those counters. So we covered just the basic rules, but how does it actually work?
So Infect causes a replacement effect. If damage will be dealt, that many -1/-1 counters are placed on the creature, or that many poison counters are placed on the player instead. And so we've kind of already talked about this, but it's just, instead of doing regular damage to something, it wears things down. It puts counters on them, and instead of doing damage to players, it puts poison counters on them.
Right. And the reason why this is powerful is because creatures that have their power reduced below their maximum toughness due to -1/- counters are viewed as having 0 toughness and are therefore put into the graveyard as a state-based action. And since these are counters, they stay on the creature, which means that multiple instances of counters being placed on them will eventually kill the creature. Yep. Or if you have a -1/- counter on something and proliferate to increase the number of counters on it, then again, slowly over time, you're going to kill the creature.
Yeah, so this is just something to keep in mind, because this gets through indestructible in a lot of weird cases.
Yeah, because it's not dealing damage.
Yeah.
And the reason why this is such a divisive topic is
the last little point here. Once a player receives 10 poison counters in total, they lose the game. Now, I think the reason why it's divisive, like you said, Drew, is because that exact number carries throughout every format. So in Standard, when it would be half your life total, or Modern, those things seem more fair. You don't see a lot of Standard players going, this is bullshit. It's Commander players that get really uptight about it, because instead of 40 damage dealt, you only have to do 10 quote-unquote damage with your poison counters.
I don't know. You infect someone out 2 games in a row in Modern, and they're probably also not happy about it.
I mean, nobody's going to like it, but I think the people who are really up in arms are about this, like 25% of your life total. That's the big thing.
Yeah, and we'll get into, the frustrations of Infect, but where is Infect even used? Because you'd think that something that seems to be so powerful would just be used everywhere.
Yeah, you would think so, but
how about Vintage?
No, not really.
Legacy?
So in Legacy, it's also pretty rare, but Drew noted here the new Teferi Time Raveler, enabling the decks by shutting down opponent's ability to respond and react to those cards.
Right. So Teferi, the reason why he works is because he stops your opponents from able to cast instant stuff at instant speed.
Right.
Very powerful.
Yeah, which is a powerful effect in and of itself. So you've got this blue-white into the Infect, when traditionally it was seen as kind of a white, black, and green thing. And the more, more successful Modern decks right now are blue-green Infect. And so in Modern, like, you see the largest amount of play. It's still kind of uncommon. I think the last time I looked on MTG Goldfish, it was like 0.14% of deck lists. So really, really low down there. Pauper, it's technically possible, but it's missing some key components. Largely, it's a deck that's built around key uncommons and with rare lands as well. So you just don't have those in Pauper, so you're going to be slower, and the very specific rare cards that you have just aren't available. And Commander and EDH, right?
Yeah, I think it's uncommon, but certainly more popular than, like we said, Standard, just because the card pool is so wide that people can have that deck, and you're cheating so much of the damage needed to deal. I think it pops up in a lot of like those quick Voltron-y type decks. And
yeah, I think
proliferate decks.
Yeah, I think in Commander
is the best one.
Yeah, exactly. It's very meta dependent. I've seen some Saskia decks, which is kind of fun as well. But again, like, deals with combat and being able to proliferate and things like that. Having extra colors to help you out. Yeah. And in CEDH,
probably not going to happen.
Ain't nobody got time to deal 10 counters.
Yeah.
Yeah, CADH is very, very non-interactive, not generally creature-based, or if you're using creatures, it's not. Not really for.
I would argue that CADH is the most interactive, because everybody's usually playing combo, and you have to interact with everybody's combo so that you can get your combo off.
I guess that's true. So, the combos, the win cons, are trying to be non-interactive.
Yes.
Yeah, and you might
not trying to attack people.
Yeah. You might hear this kind of idea thrown around about Infect, that it is a creature combo deck, because your emphasis is on the creatures that you have, and the combo is that you're casting your specific spells. So let's talk about the general idea, right? How do you play Infect in MTG?
So a lot of these Infect decks, they play low converted mana cost creatures with Infect. So just get lots of little dudes and just start getting those counters. And then you basically get them before they can get you, and you get in before they have any sort of board presence or any way to combat it, and then you just start pumping them up and just get to 10 and boom.
Yeah, you're trying to, like Cory said, play 1-drops, attack them before your opponent really can do anything, pump those creatures as fast as possible. So this is a very rough deck list from Modern. So as far as the creatures are concerned, we've got Glistener Elf and Blighted Agent. Blighted Agent notably has Unblockable.
It's a mean card.
It's a very, very strong card because of that. Doesn't matter if your opponent has creatures, you don't care. Glistener Elf is just a 1/1 for 1 with Infect. Very nice card. We've got supporting creatures. We've got Noble Hierarch. The important part on Noble Hierarch is not just that it ramps, but it has Exalted. Yeah. So any creature that attacks on its own gets +1/+1, which a lot of the times in Infect, you're just attacking with one creature at a time. And so that one extra point of damage, or rather that one poison counter, can mean the difference between killing your opponent in 1 turn and killing them in 2 turns.
Yeah.
And that is huge.
That 2 poison counters is potentially or essentially a fifth of their life.
Yeah. Another card they have is Spellskite. This is your Lightning Rod. So spells, spells that would be targeting other creatures are then redirected to Spellskite. Very, very strong card. And then we've got kind of the more interesting part of it, which is your spells. We've got Might of Old Krosa.
So Might of Old Krosa, it's instant for 1 green. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If you cast a spell during your main phase, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn instead. So like we said with that Blighted Agent, unblockable, 5/5 unblockable with 5 Infect, that's half of the game.
Yeah, I think that one of the backbones.
Potentially turn 3, turn 2.
Yeah, depending on, if you ramped like what your board looks like. The next one we have is Mutagenic Growth, which is one of my personal favorites to run in Infect decks. It has a Phyrexian green for the cast. So Phyrexian green can either be paid with green or 2 life. In Infect, you're paying 2 life. You don't care about your life total, generally speaking. You just want to go as fast as possible. And the effect is an instant, and target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. So this allows you to cheat mana cost and just get those extra pumps on your creatures. If you have 3 mana and you need to play 3 spells to get it pumped, sometimes you may not have the perfect, 1 drop, 1 drop, 1 drop. You might have a 2 drop and a 1 drop, and this is how you push through that extra damage. We've got Scale Up, which is a new card from Modern Horizon. It turns whatever creature into a base power and toughness 6/4, just turns it into a worm. Notably, it keeps Infect.
Yeah.
So this is a 6/4 with Infect.
Yeah, it just changes the creature type and then the stats. It doesn't change any abilities or anything like that.
Yeah, and for the mana cost on it, you play that every time.
Oh, yeah.
The last one in the pump spells is Become Immense. It is 5 and a green for an instant, but it has Delve. So each card in your graveyard can be exiled to pay for 1 of its mana cost, which is really, really strong, just because if you're throwing away your entire hand for 1 creature to attack and then it gets blown out, then you have another option to get rid of those cards to pump your creature.
Yeah, you have fuel for the next swing. Because you're probably going to kill somebody after giving something +6/+6.
Yeah. The next category for spells is your protection and evasion. These are really important because you don't want, your 1/1s to die. They die very easily, so you need some way to do it. And Blossoming Defense from Kaladesh is a really, really strong one because it gives it hexproof, but it also pumps it. So this has a dual effect on it. Super strong. I mean, it's played in, I want to say, basically every format that cares about its creatures.
Yep.
As long as you're running green, you're probably going to play this because it's so strong. Another one we've got there is Vines of Vastwood. Very similar effect. Has converted mana cost just 1 green, instant, but also has Kicker for another green. And target creature can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control this turn. So just gives them hexproof. And then if Vines of Vastwood was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So again, this dual effect on here. Give it hexproof and pump it. Very strong. 2 mana, you're going to pay that.
Yeah. Notably, a lot of these cards are used very heavily in, like you said, Modern, where it's 1v1.
Yeah, this deck is from Modern.
Yep. So you have only 1 player to worry about targeting creatures, but they're all still very good. Another one is Distortion Strike. It's 1 blue for a sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. It also has Rebound, so if you cast a spell from your hand, exile it as it resolves. At the beginning of your next upkeep, you may cast this card from exile without paying its mana cost.
Yeah, again, giving the evasion there, super important. And just the fact that it pumps it a little bit, I mean, your creatures only care about their power, how much their, quote-unquote damage they're putting forth.
Yeah, you just got to get to 10. You don't care how much life they gain. You don't care what they do.
Yeah.
Just get to 10 no matter
And this
what.
happens twice. So for 1
Yeah,
mana,
generally you need to attack twice in an Infect deck, and this will let you get there. The last spell that's going to help you protect your stuff is Spell Pierce. It's 1 mana counter spell, counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. Generally speaking, in an Infect deck, we're looking to kill your opponent turn 3 or turn 4, right? You attack turn 2 if you can, turn 3, turn 4. Yeah. And Like you can kill them as early as turn 3. I guess theoretically you could kill them on turn 2, but it's just a lot less likely. So really we're looking at turn 3 and turn 4, and that's the clock that you put on your opponent. So if they have more than 3 mana, you start to get in trouble, and spell burst gets a lot worse. But on turn 3, they're spending 2 mana on your removal spell, and it's gone.
Yeah, you don't really care about what they're doing so much as just protecting what you have. Like, you don't care if they're casting creatures because all of your things are so evasive.
Yeah, because basically using Infect as your main game plan, you've halved the clock on your opponent because you only have to deal half as much poison counters as they have to deal damage to you. So you know that you have the ability to rush through this game.
Yeah. The next section I have on here is just the lands that they use, and these are just the specific notable ones. Obviously, they're going to use things like shock lands, fetch lands if they can, just things that have high utility.
Pendlehaven.
So yeah, the first one is Pendlehaven, which on its own doesn't cost you anything extra. It's a utility land, and
Taps for colored.
Right, it taps for a green source, which is great. But with an untapped green source and tapping it, then you get a pump effect for a 1/1, which most of your creatures are going to be 1/1s in the deck. And it gives them +1/+2 till end of turn, which this extra little 1 damage, I keep talking about it, it matters so much in a deck like this that you can't really take it for granted.
Another one I think that most people know is Inkmoth Nexus. So this is a man land. It's taps for colorless. You could pay 1 colorless, and it becomes a 1/1 Blinkmoth artifact creature with flying and infect until end of turn. It's still a land.
We know some of the quote unquote staples for a deck like this, or archetypes, creature archetypes. What's the actual strategy that we're trying to get going here?
So I've got the summary here. Step 1, land an infect creature.
Whoa.
Fast as possible.
All right. You got to swing in and pump it for as much as possible, hopefully lethal. Remember that a 1/1 creature needs 9 additional power for a 1-shot kill. This is generally 3 spells, but can be 2 spells, especially with Exalted from Noble Hierarch. So spread over 2 turns, that's usually 3 to 5 counters, and then 5 to 7, the opposite of that, whatever's remaining, basically. So you want to use protection and evasion spells to ensure your damage gets through. And generally, like I said before, you're looking to kill your opponents in 3 to 4 turns. You're not usually very interactive. Like Spell Pierce is probably the only thing that you care about. You can use your pump spells to save your creature from burn, but you don't care about your life total. You don't care about your opponent's life total. All you care about is counting 10.
All right, so now that we know what these dastardly Infect players are trying to do, let's finish these beers.
I don't know if I'm going to finish it immediately, but
Chug it.
Give it another look. This is honestly like a really, really nice beer. Complex. The flavor has been developing this entire time.
I would almost go as far to say that this beer is not crushable in that it's a savorable beer because I kind of like sipping on it.
I mean, I could crush this beer, but
I agree with both of you. I could totally savor this like we are doing right now. Or just being outside, just hanging out in the sunshine and just chugging these because it's so good. It's so easy to drink. There's so much flavor. It's not heavy.
yeah,
It's just refreshing.
it is very, very refreshing. It's enjoyable.
It's really, really crisp for a beer that has nearly no hops.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the best Pelican beer I've had because the other ones I've had, they've been okay.
Yeah, Pelican,
They've been generic.
they're very hit and miss. The ones they have that are good are very good, and the ones they have that are not are okay. I don't think they have any bad beers unless you don't like IPAs, in which case like half their stock right now is IPAs. But, they're in the Pacific Northwest. That's kind of what you expect.
Yeah, it's a lot of these microbreweries.
There's a lot of IPAs.
They got big off their IPAs and then they're branching out and stuff.
Past the beer, let's get to this actual discussion here. Time to discuss Infect. Okay, so you've heard the facts. You know the cards in the deck, at least for Modern. You know what the deck wants to do. Just kind of opening ideas. Cory, you and I, we both agree Infect is a good thing, but why?
I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing. I'm okay with it. Like, I wouldn't argue that it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think it's just another game mechanic. Like, we've talked about this a lot of times on a lot of episodes, but I'm okay running land destruction.
Right.
And it's just, I can see that it's a mean thing because it's making people not be able to play the game, but it's just another way to play the game.
Right.
In my opinion. That's just kind of how I see it. And obviously, there's a lot of douchey things you can do with Infect and Proliferate and like stacks decks and just mass land destruction or just decks that don't really go anywhere. But at least with Infect, you're setting the clock, you're moving the game, and you're hopefully keeping that momentum. So I wouldn't say it's a good or a bad thing. It's just another way to play, which is why I'm totally okay with it. I think I have one Infect card in one of my decks, and it's just Triumph of the Hordes. It's just an overrun effect.
To give your stuff Infect.
Yeah.
Right.
It gives Infect and +1/+1 Infect and Trample.
Notably, this is a commander deck.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's just a way to get through and usually kill the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. And personally for me, like, I think Infect is a good thing. I think I'll probably explain why after Garion talks about why he's not a fan of it, just because it's the logical argument for what he's probably going to say. But I think that Infect is just like any other alternate win con, right? Like,
Yeah,
if you like any other alternate win con, you honestly have no excuse, in my opinion, to dislike Infect, because that is essentially what it is. It's changing the rules of the game, as Cory was talking about, to win in a different way. And I think that in and of itself is fun, right? Because if we all just had the same type of decks, creatures bashing against each other over and over again, that kind of would ruin the game of Magic, right? The fact that we have instants, sorceries, enchantments, artifacts, like just such a wide array of ways to play the game, I think the Infect just adds to that. I honestly don't think that it detracts from it. I think that there are ways, that it's balanced out, obviously. But I'll go into that after Garion has his piece. So.
Yeah, I think just something to throw in there. I think looking at it as an alternate win con is a really good idea, because if you just think of the card Revel in Riches, you just have to get 10 treasures.
Right.
10 treasures and you win the game.
Yeah, that's the card I had in mind when I was thinking that. But there's also cards like Felidar Sovereign.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird win cons that are harder and easier.
Yeah.
And Infect might be just super hard to win with sometimes.
We're going to be doing an episode on win cons. And so I want to preface what I'm about to say with, I actually like alternate win cons. I think it creates that extra edge in your building that you just have to prepare for. There is always the possibility that someone could pull some shit out that changes what's going on in the game. It makes the game more complex. It makes it more interesting. It makes it fun.
Okay, so Cory and I will hold our tongue here for a minute. You're just, opening thoughts here. Why is Infect a bad thing? Why is it like a negative thing, perhaps?
The reason I always talk so much shit on Infect is specifically from a commander perspective. When we talk about it in our play group, it's almost always talking about commander, talking about a deck based on Infect with fucking Skitherix and all these, cards like that. Now, I don't necessarily hate Infect by itself. I actually really like poison counters, or I guess it'd be Infect counters on creatures. I love the idea of that with like the archetypes, like insects and spiders and snakes. I think that's a really cool way to make it more lore-centric. It's just an interesting way to play the game. What I don't like is that for all the 20 life formats, it's half your life. But for EDH, it's a quarter of your life. I think that's where I think it's not a bad strategy or a bad thing that Wizards did. I just think it's too overpowered or undercosted for the format. It just becomes one of those things where a Voltron deck has to do 21 damage, but now we've added cards that make it only 10. 10 Infect damage that I can get out as soon as possible and just murder an entire player. To me, it just seems like the math is wrong to me. One-on-one, I really like it because, like you said, it's speeding up the clock. It's creating a new dynamic to the game. So when I complain about it, if I ever talk shit about it on these episodes, which I'm sure I will, it's specifically in EDH that I'm not a fan.
So before we get into the main discussion, hold on, Cory. You might actually be asking the same question I want, but would you say that if we raised the poison counters required to lose a game in EDH to 15, 20, 21, somewhere in there, that then Infect would be okay by you?
Yes.
Where? Are we talking about half the life total, just like you would in normal
that seems like the logical place to land, or 21 for the same as commander damage. Honestly, even 15 is a huge improvement, quote unquote, to me. But I think logically it would just be 20. It would just be half the life total. Basically what it is saying, I'm playing a deck that speeds up our clock by 50%. We have to now play this game twice as fast to beat this player. But playing it a quarter as fast just seems super brutal and scary.
See, I think one way to look at it, I agree that raising it not to 20 but to 15, I think that'd be an okay way. to deal with it, just so that people don't get just one-shotted by blight steals. Like that's just I don't think that's a
I think that when you
fun
have a
way
nickname
to
for
win.
a card as one-shot robot,
Yeah.
that it's kind of intimidating.
But I think one way to look at it is if you're the Infect player, right now you have to do 30 damage to everybody.
Instead of 120.
Yes.
Which is
But-
why it's crazy.
and this is kind of where Corey's going with this, is that Infect creatures are tiny.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking about literally 1/1s, 2/2s. I think the biggest Infect creature is Skithiryx.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh, no, I think it's Blightsteel.
Oh, right. It's
Besides Blightsteel.
Well, yeah, I was going to say besides Blightsteel, but Blightsteel's expensive. Actually, Skithiryx is also expensive.
Yeah, they're all-
Poor argument.
Yeah,
But the
they
point
don't-
is that most of them are 1/1s, 2/2s. Right? I think there's another 3/3 out there, but it is such a difficult task. So to get to 30 is actually exceptionally difficult in a 4-player game, because basically you have to pick a target from the very beginning. Because as soon as you put a poison counter on someone, you've just said, okay, I'm trying to kill you first. You have, a very limited amount of turns, and you're playing an aggro deck in Commander with tiny creatures. Right? Like obviously there's things you can do with like Proliferate and things like that where it makes it a little bit easier. But essentially you're playing an aggro deck in a 4-player game, which there's a reason why Boros hasn't been good. There's a reason why Mono Red is kind of like relegated to very specific strategies, is because aggro just does not work in a 4-player game.
It's similar to Voltron, where you're focused, and usually when Voltron, you kill one person. Like once you start commander damaging them, you can't start attacking other people. You have to focus on them and kill them first.
Yeah,
like, you
there's
pick a target
massive
and then you go.
ramifications to it. And as soon as you get close to killing one person, politics starts, and everyone else realizes, okay, this is possible to die by Infect. So we need to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? And destroying 1 or 2 creatures is more than enough to stop an entire deck in Infect. Whereas other decks are going to be a lot more residual, right? Because you think of, the decks that I've talked about for Modern. What is the strategy? Tiny creatures, quick pump effects, kill them in 3 turns. Okay, now you've emptied your hand. Now you have to restart and do it all again. And then if you're successful the second time, now you have to restart, do it all again for the 3rd time. It is legitimately a very difficult mechanic to do in Commander because you are working against 3 people.
Yeah, I think that is why a lot of people have drifted away from aggro Infect and more to, like we were talking about, Proliferate Infect. Because Proliferate reads, you can just add another counter of any type on anything.
Yeah, person or permanent.
Yeah, and so you just got to put one counter on each opponent and then just play 9 Proliferate spells.
Yeah, it's almost like a combo deck in that you're trying
Yeah.
to get the Proliferate count as high as you possibly can. But when you're playing those decks, like that first one is so important, which kind of is pushing towards like my next idea, which is that Infect is one. Like I'll say that Mono Red Burn kind of strategies are also very similar in this, that they balance metas. If you don't have these ones in there, then things like control or combo can really just take over. Whereas Infect keeps those ones in check, right? It says you have to figure out how to have protection or like low drop creatures to defend yourself with. Otherwise, I'm coming through and I'm just going to steamroll you, right? And if you don't have these threats, these potential threats in your meta, then it just says, okay, then a specific deck archetype or control strategy or whatever it happens to be can just continue to run the meta for an extended period of time. And then all of a sudden, when Infect or Burn or something like that is reintroduced, everyone has to like take a step back because all of a sudden this deck is going to become so much more powerful than everything else. And this is generally speaking like more for like 1v1 formats, but I think that it can exist similarly in Commander, where you have to balance your meta, you have to balance your play group, and there's alternate win cons, alternate ways to do that. And I think that Infect is one of those ways that if all of a sudden you're able to kill someone on turn 3, it's like, okay, I'm going to kill whoever is the biggest threat here. And you can kind of politic that and say, okay, I'm going to kill that person, they're the biggest threat, kill them, and herald it as a hero or whatever it happens to be. But if they don't have an aggressive curve, they don't have creatures that can block for them, they don't have protection, whatever happens to be, then they're going to lose. And so it changes how people build decks, how they metagame. And I think that's something that's underspoken, but I think that's something that's super, super important to talk about.
Well, and I think the balancing of the meta is just, I think that's important for all alternate win cons. Like we said, it makes games more interesting, but it also makes building more interesting. When you start putting in slots in your 99, you have to consider your meta. Is there a way that someone could screw me with some random Infect creatures? How do I deal with that? my problem comparing Infect with Mono Red or Boros aggro is that deck still has to do 120 damage, where an Infect deck only has to do 30. And I've only played against one Infect deck in EDH, but the problem that I see is that when you build Infect in EDH versus in 1v1 formats, I don't think it's built like you said. I don't think it's a bunch of low-to-the-ground creatures. The EDH version of an Infect deck is a Voltron deck. It's trying to cheat out Blightsteel, or it's trying to give your commander Infect and swing for lethal in one turn with one creature. I mean, it's just like any alternate win con. Like, if you don't like it, you don't like it. I can't really explain why I think it's so cheesy compared to Revel in Riches or any other weird win con. But for some reason, it chaffs my ass because of the fact that it's not the same as other formats. It should just be half the life total.
See,
if it was half the life total and they were still whooping ass with Infect, I'd just be like, well, that's how it is.
Yeah, and like I have to disagree just because like you can look on EDH Rec and find like what decks are actually playing what spells, and I would honestly argue that probably about 50% of the decks are doing the low to the ground aggressive like small creatures that they're pumping out. Because I mean, there's so many different pump effects in all sorts of colors that people can run, and those sorts of decks are probably going to be less successful. But I think that is such a common mode for Infect to run in that that's what people are going to run, and I think that we're going to see as much of that as we are going to see like a combo Infect or like, proliferate combos or whatever, anything like that. I don't think it's just, give your commander Infect, because there's so few cards that actually give cards Infect that it's almost not worth running. You're better off just going for Voltron commander damage than you are for Infect. Whereas if you have a bunch of, little 1/1s and you're able to get in early, kill someone on turn 3 or 4, then it's a lot easier to actually get someone out of the game than it is to try and suit up and then go, full Voltron, and then also throw in that Infect, instant sorcery, whatever happens to be.
I think one way that Infect sort of balances out, because on the table, doing 30 damage versus 120 damage looks way easier playing Infect. But I think doing that makes you the threat. Like, as soon as you sit down and start playing Infect, you're arch enemy. It's 3v1 now, because they know how easy it is for you to kill them.
Yeah. And also, I will
maybe
say,
it's just that dynamic that I don't like then.
Yeah. So this is like my other argument, is that if you think about a commander game, everyone has 40 life, which means that in order to kill everyone, you have to deal a certain amount of damage, average across the table. And so 30 is about right for about how much damage you have to do in order to balance it out, because you alone are not doing 120 damage. I don't think that is a correct assessment.
Yeah.
And to say that you are the only person,
yeah.
Well, and I guess the other thing to say is
you're not doing normal damage.
Right.
You are doing an alternate damage, which means that it changes the entire table's perspective of what damage actually means. And so I don't think it's correct to say that 30 Infect damage is the same as 120 damage. I think, maybe you say 80 damage or, 90 damage, maybe. But at the same time, you cannot say it's 120 damage, because one person is never doing the full amount of damage.
Unless you're playing Kranko.
So what we're saying with this episode is we want all of you beautiful listeners to go build an Infect deck and bring it to your play group, and then take a vote after the game and see whether everybody likes it or not.
I don't even think that you need to build the deck, but I think that having the discussion is important. Right? Like, for us, I mean, we're 3 out of 5 or 6 of our play group that consistently is able to play together. And so having the discussion is important. You have to think, is Infect, too strong? Is it OP? Whatever. Like, I don't care about that. What I care about is, do players think that it's fair? Do players think that it's fun, whether to play against or to play themselves? And as someone who's, played a fair amount of Infect in Modern, I think that, it's a lot of fun to just go kill your opponent on turn 3 or 4. Like obviously, like, winning can be fun, but I think that your play group, the people that you play consistently with, it matters a lot more whether or not that is looked down upon or like seen as, too strong or whatever, because you're going to consistently play with these people over and over again. And if you're the Infect guy, like, you're going to be the target. Or it's like, okay, you're changing the meta for a good thing or a bad thing. That's kind of up to your meta.
Yeah, I think a problem with being the Infect guy is that, 1, you're the target, and 2, especially if it's your friends you're probably going to kill somebody really
You have to
quickly.
choose one person.
And they're going to be out of the game. Like, you
Yep.
came to hang out and play, but they are out of the game. They're not playing Magic anymore. They're just hanging out or doing whatever.
Yeah.
And so
Which is why tournament style, like modern stuff like that, like it's who gives a fuck.
Exactly.
I'm here to win.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for tournament situations, obviously. But I'm just talking about, in general. Like,
Yeah, if you're just chilling with your friends, I think that's just another thing to think about in your play group. Because unless you can actually do it really well and kill everybody relatively quickly, then it's just sort of taking somebody out of the game. It's a similar argument with mass land destruction.
that's what I was going to say. Is that land
Because
destruction is
unless you
very
can
similar.
capitalize it and do something with it,
Then you're just the guy who just wiped everyone to stop everyone playing Magic. But why?
is me sometimes. Yeah.
Well, and I also think it depends. It's heavily meta dependent on whether you want to insert it as well. So it like you said, it changes the meta, so it becomes meta dependent on everybody else.
But can the meta take it, right?
Well, and also, like, what's your reason? Is it like, I'm just going to be fucking brutal and just murder you guys? Or is there, like you said, is there that super control player that's really dominating your meta? Because if there is that guy, then maybe you do. You bring it in and you go, yeah, you're winning all these games. Cool. Let's see if you can win on turn 4. Because if not, you're out, bud.
Yeah, I think that just kind of encourages
kinda
the same
happens
idea
with
that I was
Wizards.
talking about. That you have to have the conversation.
Yeah.
Right? You
Yeah.
have to be able to talk to your play group.
Right.
And whether it's, because someone's comboing out on turn 4 every single time, or
Right.
someone's playing Infect, you're all human.
Yeah.
Right? This is a game.
And you're buds.
You're trying to have fun. You're playing with your friends. Sit down and talk to each other. It's
Yeah.
okay. Like, don't ruin your play group, for Infect combo. I don't give a fuck what it is.
Right.
yeah, it's
like-
a slippery slope, making like more and more degenerate decks to fight the degenerate decks.
We personally have seen it in our play group.
And it's fine as long as you understand that there is a line.
I think it's just Infect has this negative connotation. As soon as you say Infect, people are like, nope, I'm not down. But I think it's just like Drew and Gary were saying, you got to have this discussion. You got to talk about it and be like, hey, like, it's not broken unless I'm playing this combo, which I'm not. Like, it's just another way to play Magic.
And as Garion actually said before, I said, wait, have the discussion. But sometimes you do need to test it. Like, okay, just give me, one game. I, have this idea. Let me build the deck. Let me play, and we'll see how it is. And like, if you don't just absolutely annihilate people, and I'm not saying you should sand it. I'm saying that rather than sandbag, play the deck as best you can. See how well it can actually do against, like middle tier decks. Some of the better decks, if it, can compete against those very well. Like, you need to see where the deck's power level is at, because sometimes, you build this crazy deck that can kill one person real quick, and then it just peters out and does nothing.
Yeah, sometimes you got to sneak attack, Blade of Selves, Blightsteel, and kill the table. And other times you just got to chill.
Well, and I think it
And
goes
other
back
times
to
you
what,
one punch man, and then you die because everyone says, oh, he can kill me in one hit.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to what Cory says. You may not win the game, but you still irritated at least a third of the other players enough that they might not want to play with you anymore. So, like we've said a million times, it's about the discussion. If your play group's cool with it, then go for it. If my play group was cool with it and I was the only one who's like, I fucking hate Infect, I'm like, all right, let's play it. I mean, that happens. You know what I mean? It's the same thing with Raise Boar. Like, if I'm playing against Cory's Ilharg Raise Boar, he's going to attack one person and commander them out. Like, that's kind of half the strategy. So, like, if I happen to be selected as the person who didn't have the blockers or the person who was out in front, I'm going to die first. It doesn't matter if it's Infect damage or commander damage. I'm getting targeted, and that sucks, but that's just the way the decks work.
Yeah, and one thing that I just want to harp on real quick is that Garion said, kick the player out of the play group. I want to stress that you don't want to, like...
Did I say that?
Something similar, but you don't want...
Damn, dude.
Don't hate the player, right? Like, you can hate the deck, but really try and focus away from... like hating on one player for one deck that they have, right? Especially Commander, like everyone has, 2 or 3 decks at minimum, I think. Like, try and be constructive about deck building and like suggestions rather than being like, you're not allowed to play, in this play group. Just be like, hey, can you not play Infect? Most of the people here agree that it's not fun. Again, just talk to people.
So, Gary,
Yeah, I just want to note, I don't condone kicking out people from a play group. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
so if you think about it this way, do you still hate Infect even in EDH?
Right. So let's ask the last question here, right? Is Infect too strong? Right? Like, basically, I'm asking, is it OP? Is it
I
is
think
it like
no.
Blightsteel is OP,
I was
but
gonna say-
Infect as a general concept.
Yeah, do you
I
hate
think
it? Is
it's
it OP?
okay.
Like what is your stance on it?
The
And
problem is
why
if
or
you
why
got
not?
rid of Blightsteel, then Infect would be nothing. Because that's like the big thing that makes it so scary.
I think in EDH, yeah, because you just cheat it out.
Do I think it's overpowered? No. I think emotionally I still don't really like it, but like I just said, I would allow it if everybody at the table was allowing it. Like I'm not going to be like, you can't play that deck or I'm walking.
So would bumping it up to 15 or 20 counters
Probably.
make you more okay with that?
That actually makes me think.
Probably,
like
but I don't love Voltron decks either. Like, I'm not going to be like, hey, you're playing Voltron, I'm not going to play with you. But at the same time, I'm like, God damn it, if I get targeted, I have half as much time as everybody else on the board to try and figure out how to beat this guy. And it's 1v1 with me instead of like, can I get help? Because if I ask Cory, like, dude, Drew's about to kill me with this Voltron, can you help me out? He's like, no, why the fuck would I do that?
You're the enemy.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
I think
whereas
you're
like
bad at making deals, and we'll talk about that in a different episode.
yeah, that's
But
a whole different.
My question is now, like, is there a way, whether in your play group or otherwise, that you can actually have that discussion instead? Is can we just raise Infect to 15?
Yeah, I think most groups are okay with slight rule changes. Obviously, playing banned cards and stuff like that is an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
But I think
Damn the
I
ban
think
list.
this
Do what
is
you
an okay rules change.
Unfortunately, like you said, the Infect deck, it's not that it's the strongest deck. It's not that it's going to win all the time. So unfortunately, the people who are going to ask for the rule change to make it harder for Infect to kill someone are not the people that are playing it. And so then it's kind of rough on the Infect player. Like, I just spent all this money to like make a cool deck that I think works well. And now you guys are trying to manipulate the rules to make it to where not only is it hard for me to win, but it's hard for me to even get like a one shot or like a one player. I get that. So if Wizards changed it, or I guess the Commander
Rules committee, I would be down for it. But I don't think I'd go that far to ask my Infect player, like, hey, I'll play with you, but only if you change the rules of how that I'm not
deck
saying
is
that like
functioning.
that's how it always has to be. I'm just saying
Yeah.
that you have the discussion, which
It's
all of
certainly
this is about,
possible to happen.
talking. But like, say, hey, can we just try this once?
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to say this is the rule in our play group from now on.
Right.
Either
Yeah,
fucking
if it's,
consent
if you're
or
it's
that
either
guy.
no infect or 15 infect. You might as well give it a shot.
Right.
See if it's
And-
like, oh, this isn't too bad.
And still, I don't think that you have to put the ultimatum on them like that. I just think that you just
Right. See, I'm not the guy that puts ultimate. I'm not the guy who's going to walk. I'm going to play Commander no matter what. I don't fucking care. Like, I'm not the type of guy who will be. I'm not going to make anybody do anything. I'm not going to put ultimatums on people. I just love playing the game. I just don't particularly like Infect. If I get killed by the Infect creature or the Infect player first, I'm probably going to be a little salty. I'm like, God damn it, why'd you target me? And then I'm going to drink a beer and we'll play the next game. Like, it's fine. It's just one of those things that I don't prefer. It's the same as, like, I've told Sean a couple times. I refuse personally to play Vorinclex or what's the blue Jin-Jitaxis. Like, those two cards, I don't play them. If someone plays them on me, I'm like, you motherfucker, dude. But I just don't do it because I don't feel that it's the way I want to play.
I agree with that. I don't play Psychonocrypt for the same reason. But we've talked, I feel, enough about Infect for now. Let us know.
I could tell you all about it for another hour, all right?
Let us know what you guys think about Infect, what your opinions are here. Of course, as always, we've been drinking here on the show. We've had a really nice beer. Please don't drink and drive. We want you to be safe out there. Don't drink if you're underage.
Always remember,
responsible.
beers and friends are way more important than bitching about who won a game or
Yeah, or little game mechanics.
Yeah, I think that, Cory kind of nailed it in that you don't want to be a player that's knocked out early and then sitting around while, a 2-hour Commander game goes on. And I think that, that's a very, reasonable argument to stay away from Infect. But we want to hear your guys' opinions on it. We want to know, Infect, good or bad? If there's specific formats, yes, and others not. Like Garion's talking about, EDH maybe not the right format for Infect. We want to have you guys, reach out to us, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, obviously YouTube comments.
Yeah, and be sure to stay tuned for Drew's Brews. There'll be updates on that regularly.
So thank you guys for listening to me ramble on. And as always,
Have fun.
But not too much.